During the grim Depression years of the 1930s, entertainment often took strange forms. There were marathon dances, roller derbies, flagpole sitters galore. But if you tired of those, and you happened to be in the right place at the right time, you could always go see a train wreck. Local promoters, such as P.L. Cox & Sons, would buy old locomotives that were ready for the scrapyard. Then, they would find a stretch of unused railroad track, preferably located next to a convenient meadow, and run those engines into each other while spectators gazed on in amazement. And even if you didn't happen to live nearby, newsreel photographers were always on hand, and the promoters were more than willing to cooperate with them. Prior to the actual crash, the promoters often staged run-bys for the cameramen. The engines were filmed from every conceivable angle. No detail was too small for an enterprising newsreel photographer to capture. As the crowds began to gather for the great event, a second cameraman stood by to film them as well. The atmosphere usually was similar to that of a county fair. The idea, of course, was to make the finished newsreel as dramatic and thrilling as possible. Staging the camera shots often consumed several hours as promoters and photographers strained to achieve just the right effects. This may have been one of the earliest exercises in media management. Once the stage shots were filmed, the raw footage would be rushed to the nearest lab for processing. Properly edited, the end result was 30 seconds of gripping action, heart-stopping drama, edge-of-your-seat suspense, and a crash. You could catch the show at your local theater.
Gangway, look out ahead. The last mile begins for two old iron horses of an Illinois railroad. On to their doom they go to give the crowd a thrill. Casey Jones leaps for life, and here they come.
The results were often spectacular, and everybody went away happy. The promoter tucked away a tidy profit, even before he resold the wrecked locomotives for salvage. The local farmer who owned the pasture got paid for the use of his land, and the local spectators went away feeling they'd gotten their money's worth. 10 cents a head for the thrill of a lifetime. But most train wrecks are not staged. Nobody comes away happy. And the price you pay for a ringside seat is often higher, much higher, in terms of human life. The potato wreck occurred on November 3, 1934. It involves the Boston and Maine Railroad at Clinton, Massachusetts at 6:15 a.m. The accident is due to a rear-end collision. The trains involved are the N1 freight and a passenger engine eastbound. The estimated speed is 45 miles per hour. 4 people are killed and 2 are injured. The cause of the wreck is fog obscuring the signal. A heavy morning fog is believed responsible for the collision of a fast-moving Boston and Maine freight with a light passenger engine which had just pulled off a nearby siding near Clinton, Massachusetts. Stray wisps of that fog mix with smoke from the smoldering wreckage. Tons of Maine potatoes lie strewn across the accident scene, scattered after several wooden refrigerator cars on train N1 derailed and smashed into their 2 overturned locomotives. The stage was set for this crash when engineer Charles Winslow, piloting N1's lead locomotive, missed a red signal in the dense fog. As wrecking crews set to work, investigators from the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities are en route to search for the answers behind this accident. The 3 Massachusetts investigators will soon be joined by railroad personnel and representatives from the Interstate Commerce Commission. Their investigation will detail a chronology of bad weather, wrong assumptions, and tragic circumstances. Efforts to rescue trapped engine crewmen have already ended by the time maintenance of way and salvage personnel begin clearing away the wreckage. 3 men are dead, and a 4th is dying. 3 of the deaths, including engineer Charles Winslow, occurred in engine 2664. The other fatality was the engineer of passenger locomotive 3216. News of the crash spread quickly throughout the area. Railroad workers, both on and off duty, have responded to render any assistance they can. Material damages in terms of freight claims and equipment loss will reach almost $100,000. Additionally, traffic across 2 B&M routes will be snarled for hours due to extensive track damage. Many of the assembled crowd have been here since dawn. Along with railroad personnel, some of the first rescue workers to arrive were neighboring residents who had been awakened by the crash. One of those residents brought along a portable acetylene torch in an attempt to free trapped trainmen. He'd been cutting into the metal for over 10 minutes by the time the railroad and police personnel responded with heavy-duty equipment. His efforts, like those of others, were largely in vain. As he lay pinned inside the wrecked cab of engine 2664, head brakeman Alston Colby attempted to warn his would-be rescuers away from the devastation. Knowing he was dying and fearing that yet another steam pipe near him was about to burst, he urged rescue workers to turn back before they too were scalded. Rescue personnel ignored his warnings and continued to work frantically, weeping angry tears as their inability to cut the brave man free before death overtook him. Assisted by local police, inspectors from two separate state commissions, the Boston and Maine Railroad and the Interstate Commerce Commission, will soon begin their probe of the wreck. Train N1's lead locomotive and the passenger engine it struck will receive particular scrutiny, as will the condition of the nearby track signals, which should have warned N1's engineer of impending disaster. At the beginning of the investigation, several facts are known. Engineer Winslow indisputably ran his 83-car train through a red signal. His train struck engine 3216 from the rear, moments after the light passenger engine left a siding. Why did 3216 venture onto the main line at that moment? Conjecture soon takes over. A surviving train man theorizes that train N1 was running several minutes late. He thinks 3216's engineer, William Moore, assumed the train had already passed his location unnoticed in the thick shrouding fog. As investigators soon discover, however, train N1 was actually running 2 minutes ahead of schedule. Compounding the mystery is the fact that both of the dead engineers were thoroughly seasoned veterans with solid records. How did two good engineers happen to make such elementary mistakes? Was there a breakdown in communications? If so, where? In the end, investigators begin to fear they will never know the answers to these questions. Spectators continue to gather. By 10 o'clock that morning, crowd size estimates will soar to 20,000 people. Massachusetts state troopers have been called out to help local police with crowd control. Train N1 originated in Portland, Maine, the night before. The westbound freight's destination was Worcester, Massachusetts, less than 50 miles from the scene of the wreck. Many of its wood-sheathed reefers were splintered beyond repair. Railroad workers quickly dispose of their remains, loading them into waiting gondolas. The twisted wreckage appears to stretch forever, even as cleanup crews continue their efforts. Traffic on the New Havens line through Clinton is also being seriously delayed as a result of this wreck. Boston and Maine officials state the main line will be back in service later that same evening. Meanwhile, the railroad has dispatched buses to handle its disrupted commuter traffic. Hours after the crash, 3216 awaits the wrecker's crane. Steam still hisses slowly from the battered engine as fire officials keep a close watch on her and the other two locomotives. The accident investigation will take months to complete. Bad weather, bad timing, bad judgment. Ultimately, the Clinton, Massachusetts train wreck will stand as a tragedy of errors. The wreck at Vanderveer Park occurred on December 4, 1934. It involves the Long Island Railroad at Brooklyn, New York at 9:48 a.m. The accident is the result of a collision of two trains and a derailment. The trains involved are an N1 freight westbound and a maintenance of way train. The estimated speed is 50 miles per hour. 2 people are killed and 12 are injured. The cause of the wreck is excessive speed in an occupied block. Following in the wake of a dramatic mid-morning collision, emergency personnel and investigators worked their way across the accident scene at Brooklyn's Vanderveer Park. 2 men died and 12 others were seriously injured when a 17-car New York, New Haven, and Hartford freight slammed into the rear of a slow-moving Long Island work train. Before the day is over, the Kings County District Attorney's Office will mistakenly arrest 2 Long Island Railroad employees on suspicion of manslaughter. Under the guidance of a New York City deputy medical examiner, police officers investigate the body of New Haven engineer William Marley, who was crushed to death following his train's collision with Long Island Work Extra 312. The body of the accident's other fatality, Assistant Shop Superintendent William Scheckler, lies nearby. Both bodies will be removed to the police pathology lab for formal autopsies. As they conduct their initial examination, police investigators ask themselves, how can 2 trains collide in broad daylight on a stretch of track controlled by automatic signals? As the search for clues begins, railroad personnel are already hard at work, cutting into the twisted wreckage to clear the tracks. New Haven Engine 077 was the lead unit in Symbol Freight N1's 4-unit lash-up. It was totally demolished when the impact of its collision with Long Island's Extra 312 forced it straight up into the Albany Avenue overpass. The other 3 electric engines also sustained severe damage as falling concrete rained down on them from the bridge. A small army of bystanders hover over the site, intently watching every phase of the ongoing drama. At least one onlooker has thought to bring along his lunch. Estimates of train N1's speed range as high as 50 miles per hour at the time of the collision, which may explain the heavy damage to these engines. Eyewitnesses will testify they saw showers of sparks flying as N1's engineer desperately fought to break his train's momentum. Although the subsequent ICC investigation will never be able to pinpoint the train's actual speed, its official report will conclude the train was traveling faster than the 45-mile-per-hour restriction for this area. Long Island Steam Engine 312 had just begun to push its 6-car work train into motion when the wreck occurred. Under the engineer's supervision, the fireman was operating the engine when the train's brakeman observed the onrushing New Haven freight. All 3 men had barely enough time to jump clear and save their lives. Scattered wreckage litters all 4 tracks of the busy main line through Vanderveer Park. Traffic from both the Long Island and New Haven railroads will be paralyzed for hours before dispatchers are able to reroute them around the bottleneck. Police officers puzzle over the mangled debris, amazed at the extent of the damage, while at least one spectator among the crowd snaps a few souvenir photos. Railroad personnel are responding to the scene in an effort to understand what happened. Long Island technical personnel have already determined that all signals governing the trackage are in proper working order, and motive power supervisors from the New Haven will soon conclude that the brakes on their 4 electric locomotives were functioning properly. Early in the investigation, technical malfunctions have been ruled out. The police investigation centers around a Long Island yardmaster and a dispatcher. Fire personnel were the first to respond to the disaster, and they remain on the scene to forestall any possibility of fire breaking out. Their efforts were instrumental in rescuing several railroad workers and preventing additional injuries. The 2 men who died in the crash were beyond any man's assistance. The Albany Avenue overpass will be closed to all traffic for several weeks before repairs are completed. By that time, investigators from the Interstate Commerce Commission, working with representatives of the New York Public Service Commission, will have begun to put together their final report on the crash at Vanderveer Park. Their findings will completely exonerate the 2 men arrested by the Kings County District Attorney's Office. The ICC report will conclude that human error on the part of both train crews led to the fatal crash. According to the Commission, New Haven's train N1 proceeded into Vanderveer Park under permissive block signal with cautionary instructions that Long Island Extra 312 was directly ahead of it. Based on eyewitness testimony, the Commission will surmise that Engineer Marley mistakenly believed that he had already safely passed this train before increasing his speed around a curve. The actual cause of the tragedy, however, will be determined only after 2 months of careful investigation by the Interstate Commerce Commission. The Commission will also determine that Extra 312's flagman failed to properly protect his train by placing lighted fusees on the track once it had stopped. Extra 312's engineer will also be reprimanded for failing to ensure that the flagman adequately performed his duties. The report will be issued 2 months after the accident. For now, December 4th, 1934 draws to a close on a scene of confusion, concerted activity, and tragedy. The gasoline tank train wreck occurred on April 10, 1936. It involves the Santa Fe Railroad at Olaf, Kansas at 3 a.m. The accident is the result of a derailment with resulting explosions. The train is a mixed freight with a large number of gasoline tank cars and is heading north. The estimated speed is 35 miles per hour. There are no casualties. The cause of the wreck is a spreading rail. Wreckers and fire officials work to clear the debris resulting from a spectacular Santa Fe freight derailment near Olaf, Kansas, as the fire from 25 tank cars continues to rage in the distance. The derailment occurred early in the morning as the 40-car train hit a spreading rail. Miraculously, no one was injured. Before the fire is officially declared under control, however, more than 250,000 gallons of gasoline will be consumed. The raging fire defies the efforts of firefighters, who can only stand by and wait for it to burn itself out. Area residents awoke to the sound of terrific explosions when the pre-dawn wreck occurred. Eyewitnesses report flames that leaped over 100 feet into the air. Surrounding pastures have been scorched by the blaze, and all trees within a several hundred-yard radius are now dead. Smoldering tank cars lie in jumbled masses, even as others continue to burn. Santa Fe acted quickly once news of the wreck reached division headquarters, immediately dispatching equipment and manpower to the scene. A wrecking crane stands by, while firefighters concentrate their resources on controlling the fire's spread. Acres of adjoining grassland have been thoroughly wetted down as part of this effort. Santa Fe's operations between Olathe and Newton have been completely shut down by the derailment. The fire and explosions have totally destroyed over a quarter mile of a very busy double-track main line, forcing dispatchers to scramble as they reroute their trains across the division. Tired railroad workers trudge alongside the devastation, apparently too weary to take notice of the nearby flames. Law enforcement personnel from several jurisdictions have also responded to the site, primarily to keep scores of curious onlookers at a safe distance. Even as the gasoline continues to burn, wrecking crews are already at work towing the damaged tankers off the tracks to clear the way for track repair gangs. Intense heat generated by the fire has melted much of the tank car's metal components, which further complicates the task of removing them from the accident scene. The most severely damaged cars will be scrapped by their owner. The rest face extensive refitting before they return to service. As soon as the fire begins to die down, Santa Fe track gangs turn to the job of replacing damaged trackage. Rails have been twisted into useless ribbon by the fire, and their ties have been burned beyond use. It will be several days before most of the debris is cleared away, but Santa Fe is fully committed to reopening its main line by later that night. Telephone repairmen work to restore local phone and telegraph service, which has been totally disrupted by the crash. Wreckers work from both ends of the derailment, quickly and efficiently, clearing away as much of the wreckage as possible. By 3 p.m., the fire is under control, and many of the spectators have already left. For fire crews, as well as railroad personnel, however, a long, hard afternoon and evening still lie ahead. The wreck at Custer Creek occurred on June 19, 1938. It involves the Milwaukee Road at Custer Creek, Montana at 12:35 a.m. The accident is the result of a bridge collapse and derailment into the river. The train involved is a passenger train, the Olympian, and is westbound. The estimated speed is 65 miles per hour. 47 people are killed and 86 injured. The cause of the wreck is weakened bridge pilings due to a flash flood. Custer Creek, Montana presents an incredible scene of devastation on the morning following the wreck of Milwaukee's train number 15, the Olympian. As a wrecked train stands by, surviving passengers and spectators huddle together for warmth on both banks of the overflowing creek. Over 20 bodies have already been pulled from these submerged passenger cars at the time these shots are taken. By week's end, 7 more bodies will be recovered, one from as far as 50 miles downstream in the Yellowstone River. Ultimately, the official death toll will reach 47. There may remain as many as 5 other unreported fatalities. In addition to these deaths, 86 injured passengers and crewmen have already been evacuated to local hospitals. As the morning light spreads across the wreckage, rescue operations continue. Divers working nearby have removed the bodies of both engine crewmen. Although the day has dawned clear and sunny, heavy rains were falling steadily just before midnight, when creek waters rose dramatically and seriously weakened the 27-year-old bridge across Custer Creek. Unaware of impending tragedy, this 464 Baltic-type engine led its 11-car consist to tragedy. The bridge gave way directly under it. Scrambling for traction as the bridge collapsed, the locomotive snaked through the air like the snapper on a circus whip before coming to rest upside down on the railway post office car immediately behind it. For many, trapped inside the sudden wreckage, there was no hope at all. Only a few short hours later, the ghostly shadow of a passing cowboy overlooks the scene of so many deaths. Rain had been falling steadily hours before the tragedy. Because of this, Milwaukee road personnel inspected every inch of the roadbed before allowing any of its trains to proceed through the area. At the time of this inspection, Custer Creek had been reported running pretty low by a track walker who checked the area. Within minutes, however, a sudden cloudburst sent a 30-foot battering ram of water slashing at the railroad bridge. The passengers in one sleeper owe their lives to an incredibly brave Pullman porter. As his car teetered on the edge of the riverbank, Lewis Williams raced through the car, rousing his passengers from their berths and evacuating them to safety before the car slid into the flood-swollen creek. As railroad personnel labored to recover the last remaining fatalities and clear the debris, the results of that flash flood became abundantly clear. The city of San Francisco occurred on August 12, 1939. It involves the Southern Pacific Railroad at Carlin, Nevada at 10:32 p.m. The wreck is the result of a derailment on a bridge. The train involved is the 101, City of San Francisco westbound. The estimated speed is 60 miles per hour. 24 people are killed and 60 injured. The cause of the wreck is sabotage of the rails and roadbed. Sabotage is to blame for the wreck of the westbound City of San Francisco on the night of August 12, 1939. As 14 of the Streamliner's 17 cars lie skewed across Nevada's Humboldt River Canyon, investigators have already determined that a rail was deliberately loosened shortly before the train arrived. 24 people died and 60 others were injured when the train left the tracks and plunged into the riverbed. Amazingly, the train's diesel locomotives managed to lurch their way across the bridge before grinding to a halt on the other side. Because the disaster occurred in a remote stretch of the Nevada desert, initial news of the crash has been slow to reach authorities. The train's engineer had to run through the night for over an hour before reaching a telephone. Hours later, as survivors and rescue workers gaze over the wreckage, police scour the surrounding countryside for an earless man who was seen fleeing from the area following the crash. Their search proves fruitless. Within a week, a local coroner's jury will return a verdict of homicide by person or persons unknown. Evidence will show that the crime has been thoroughly planned and executed by someone who is familiar with railroad operations. Spikes have been removed from 11 ties. The rail has been carefully relocated 4 inches from its original location. Investigators will ultimately sift through over 1,500 leads, all of which lead to dead ends. Years later, the deliberate wreck of the city of San Francisco will remain one of railroading's great unsolved mysteries. The wreck at Death Curve occurred on April 19, 1940. It involves the New York Central at Little Falls, New York at 11:30 p.m. The accident is the result of a derailment. The train involved is the Lakeshore Limited, eastbound. The estimated speed is 59 miles per hour. 30 people are killed and 62 injured. The cause of the wreck is excessive speed on a curve. Death Curve, near Utica, New York, has once again lived up to its name. 30 passengers and crewmen lie dead within the twisted wreckage of New York Central's Lakeshore Limited. Flying around the sharp curve at almost 60 miles per hour, the train leapt from the track and telescoped its cars together. Red and blue flames poured from the Limited's 464 type locomotive as it pounded through the surrounding foliage and came to rest on its side. 9 of the following 15 cars have been either partially or completely destroyed in the crash. Huddled in the steady rain, spectators gape in amazement at the sheer magnitude of the wreckage before their eyes. Removal of the disaster's fatalities will take most of the day. Elsewhere, railroaders work to haul the J-Series Hudson back to the roadbed. Rescue workers have evacuated more than 60 injuries from the heavily damaged passenger cars. As onlookers maintain their morbid vigil later in the day, ICC investigators have already examined the locomotive's speedometer tape. According to this evidence, the Limited hit this curve at almost 15 miles per hour above the posted speed restriction. The engineer's last-minute brake application is blamed for causing the train to crunch inward against itself, forcing the locomotive and cars off the tracks. Within a few years of this tragedy, New York Central will substantially widen its curvature through this area beyond its current 6-degree sharpness. The infamous Death Curve, thankfully, will claim no more victims. The wreck at the Indiana Harbor Ship Canal occurred on December 2, 1941. It involves the Baltimore and Ohio at Indiana Harbor, Indiana at 10:58 p.m. The accident is the result of a derailment and an open drawbridge. The train involved is the number 8 southbound. The estimated speed is 30 miles per hour. Only 1 person is killed and 2 are injured. The cause of the wreck is the failure to operate the train in accordance with signal indication for the drawbridge. Dawn breaks on the scene of a bizarre tragedy at Indiana Harbor, Indiana. 1 man died and 2 others were injured when Baltimore and Ohio southbound train number 8 ran through the interlocking approach to a ship canal while the drawbridge was open. Even as train number 8's lead engine rests in 24 feet of water, investigators work to determine the cause of the accident. Further injuries were averted when the 13-car train hit a derail and rolled to a stop just short of the canal. The lead engine, number 57, broke loose from its train and teetered at the canal edge for long moments before falling into the water. Spectators line the canal from several vantage points as accident investigators and salvage workers proceed with their grim task. The accident occurred at 10:38 the night before, 34 minutes after train number 8 left Chicago. Although the weather has been described as misty, there are no indications that the engineer who was killed in the wreck could have failed to read the approach signals correctly. Indiana Harbor's ship canal is spanned by 5 separate drawbridges. The bridges are controlled by an electronic interlocking machine operated by the New York Central. Accident investigators have already found the interlocking controls to be in proper working order at the time of the crash. B&O mechanical personnel perform additional tests at the accident site. All safety equipment is determined to be in good shape following these tests. Trains are rerouted over the adjoining drawbridges as railroad workers complete their on-site investigation. A steam crane stands nearby, awaiting its call to pull engine 57 from the canal. According to the train's conductor, a successful routine brake test was conducted prior to train number 8 Chicago departure. An additional running test was made a few minutes later. The brakes performed flawlessly. Police divers have long since removed the engineer's body from the wreckage. A routine autopsy, coupled with testimony from additional engine crew members, will supply the answers behind this mystifying crash. The wreck at Kew Gardens occurred on November 22, 1950. It involves the Long Island Railroad at Jamaica, New York at 6:13 p.m. The wreck is the result of a rear-end collision of 2 commuter trains, number 780 and 174, also known as the 609 and the 613. The estimated speed is 35 miles per hour. 78 people are killed and 350 are injured. The cause of the wreck is the disregard of signal indications. Portable floodlights illuminate a scene of total chaos following the collision of 2 Long Island commuter trains in Kew Gardens. Police and fire officials scramble to locate survivors among the wreckage, caused when train 174 piled into the rear of train 780. 78 people lie dead inside the twisted ruins. Most of the fatalities are found in train 780's rear car and the first car of train 174, the point of maximum impact. One witness describes the dead passengers as packed like sardines in their own blood. After breaking out windows, rescue personnel use fire ladders in their attempt to reach additional survivors. Nearby, firefighters jack up the underside of wrecked passenger cars to gain access. Bystanders and survivors gaze on in shock, as though wondering when the Long Island's current bad luck will end. This is the railroad's second major commuter train crash in less than a year's time. 9 months earlier, on February 17, 1950, 2 other electrified trains collided head-on at nearby Rockville Center, killing 31 passengers while injuring numerous others. In that earlier accident, as well as in this one, individual train motormen are found to have either ignored or misunderstood signal aspects. Following tonight's tragedy, public outrage will demand increased official scrutiny of the railroad's operations along this densely trafficked main line. Stretcher bearers begin removing the fatalities from the scene. In an effort to cope with this disaster, police and fire units from several New York City boroughs have been pressed into service. All available ambulances are en route to the crash site. Every hospital within the immediate vicinity has been notified to expect major casualties. A priest from a nearby parish has also responded to render whatever assistance he can. Throughout the New York area, in the next several days, other clergymen will be kept very busy as they console those who lost loved ones in tonight's crash. Police and fire officials continue their feverish rescue efforts, doing all in their power to locate further survivors among the dead. A seemingly endless stream of fatalities and severely injured victims are removed from the wreckage. Relay teams of rescue workers evacuate them either to waiting ambulances or morgue wagons. While the rescue efforts continue, investigators from city, state, and federal agencies are already en route to the scene. Both New York City Mayor Vincent Impellitteri and State Governor Thomas Dewey have canceled their Thanksgiving vacations to take charge of the ensuing investigation. The vast majority of fatalities were passengers. The only railroad worker killed is Train 174's motorman, who was alone at the controls when the collision occurred. Investigators will never be able to determine why motorman Benjamin Picorni ran his train into the 609. The investigation will take months to complete. For now, the scene at times resembles a battlefront hospital in far-off Korea, as medics are forced to treat many of the more severely injured victims at the accident site before transporting them to waiting hospitals. Removing the final victims takes hours, as workers cut and pry their way through the wrecked passenger cars. Witnesses and survivors will recall scenes of unbelievable carnage and horror, as well as individual acts of incredible heroism and selflessness as less severely injured passengers tried to help others. Years later, survivors will also remark on the dedicated efforts of New York City police and fire personnel as they perform their duties throughout the night. Many of these officers and firefighters found themselves pulling 12 and even 18-hour shifts before they finished. At least one rescue worker will later look back on this night as the worst tragedy he's ever witnessed. Before the final victim is evacuated, more than 350 injuries will be tallied by weary stretcher bearers. Crushed between seats, buried under collapsing bulkheads, some are too badly injured to be moved even a short distance for emergency treatment. It's a miracle they even cling to life at all. A hospital intern ministers to one passenger who remained pinned inside the car for what must have seemed like an eternity before fire personnel were able to cut him free. Rescue workers look on, perhaps wondering how many others might also have been saved if only they'd been able to get to them sooner. As the hours pass, the rescue efforts draw to a close. Soon, it will be time for the accident investigators to take charge. Every item of safety equipment will be gone over in detail before the investigation is completed. The emphasis now is on preserving vital evidence as investigators and safety officials coordinate their efforts with fire and police. Eyewitnesses, survivors, and trained crewmen will be interrogated, oftentimes more than once, in an effort to learn how this catastrophe occurred. Train 780's motorman will testify that he slowed his train in response to 2 caution signals. He found that his brakes would not release, however, and so he brought his train to a stop and deployed his rear brakeman to protect the train. Long Island dispatch personnel will testify that Train 174 was then given a stop and proceed signal, indicating that a train was ahead of it. Records will indicate that Train 174 slowed accordingly, but then proceeded forward, almost as though its motorman had read the wrong signal. Train 780's brakeman reports that he signaled frantically with his lantern, but was unable to stop the following train. Speed at impact will be determined as more than 35 miles per hour. As fire and police officials continue their labors into the long night, the question nags at their minds. What happened in the control compartment of Train 174 in those final moments? Why did the train increase its speed? What was the ultimate cause of so many deaths and injuries? Years later, the answer will remain as elusive as in these first few moments. It has died with Train 174's motorman. The wreck at Woodbridge occurred on February 6, 1951. It involves the Pennsylvania Railroad at Woodbridge, New Jersey at 1:01 p.m. The accident is the result of a derailment on a bridge. The train involved is number 733, the Broker. The estimated speed is 50 miles per hour. 84 people are killed and 450 are injured. The cause of the wreck is excessive speed. Barely have the shock waves begun to settle from the Long Island Railroad crash of November 22, 1950, when another and far worse tragedy occurs at Woodbridge, New Jersey. Pennsylvania's Train 733, the Broker, was carrying over 1,000 commuters home from the New York City area when it left the tracks on a wooden trestle. As emergency workers combed the wreckage, 84 passengers lie dead inside. At least 2 cars were totally destroyed as they plunged from the trestle onto the ground below. Over 400 injuries have resulted from the wreck. Nearby buildings are quickly transformed into emergency centers to administer necessary aid as medical personnel and volunteers respond from the surrounding countryside. Many of the injured aren't able to hang on long enough to be transported to hospitals in the area. Many passengers panicked and attempted to escape from these teetering passenger cars by jumping out doors and windows onto the pavement 35 feet below. The trestle itself was built as a temporary bypass while improvements were made to the main line. It had been in service less than 12 hours when the crash occurred. Although initial suspicion centers around the trestle as the cause of this accident, eyewitnesses will state that the Broker approached the diversion at 50 miles per hour, double the posted speed restriction. ICC investigators ultimately blame excessive speed on the part of the engineer. The wreck of 2 city trains occurred on November 12, 1951. It involves the Union Pacific Railroad at Wayuta, Wyoming at 11:27 a.m. The accident is the result of a rear-end collision. The trains involved are 102, the city of San Francisco, and 104, the city of Los Angeles, both eastbound. The estimated speed is 77 miles per hour. 17 people are killed and 159 are injured. The cause of the wreck is the failure to operate in accordance with signal indications. Fierce weather conditions, as well as failure to operate a following train in accordance with signal indications, are cited by the Interstate Commerce Commission in its investigation of this collision near Wayuta, Wyoming. The crash, which involved no less than 3 trains, occurred in a heavy blizzard when Union Pacific Train 102, the eastbound city of San Francisco, struck the rear of Train 104, the city of Los Angeles. The impact sent several of Train 104's derailed cars careening into Extra 1475 East, a freight that had taken siding for the 2 streamliners. 17 people died in the collision, including crew members on both trains 102 and 104. Routine traffic has again begun to roll past the crash site at heavily reduced speeds, while UP wreck crews set to work clearing the scene. Several hearses stand by, waiting to transport the fatalities to local mortuaries. The injured have already been evacuated to neighboring hospitals, and Union Pacific has seen to the accommodation of their remaining passengers. The collision caused both passenger trains to snap apart into several sections. Many of the deaths, as well as the severest injuries, occurred as passenger cars slewed sideways down the steep embankments, hurtling their terrified occupants about like rag dolls. The final 3 cars in this train, the city of Los Angeles, were totally demolished in the collision. Wrecking crews face a heavy day's work. More than 35 individual pieces of equipment were derailed in this wreck. Steam cranes have already lifted several derailed cars back onto the track for removal. Several of these cars will be repaired and then placed back in service. Much of the damaged equipment, however, will be declared beyond salvage and scrapped. The more immediate concern is to get the debris cleared away so that UP can get both tracks of its east-west main line rolling once again. Their task is formidable. Railroad supervisors study the wreckage of Union Pacific's 928B, the second engine in Train 102's 3-unit motive power. The B unit left the rails and crashed against lead unit 5007. One last hearse stands as salvage crews remove the dead crew members from Train 102's lead unit. The fatalities include Train 102's engineer and diesel-electric maintainer, along with Train 104's flagman. Trainmen and passengers witness a sobering sight as their train passes behind the wreckage. Railroad personnel and investigators work side by side. Traffic across the division will be seriously delayed for over 1 full day due to the crash. The final injury tally will number almost 160 passengers, trainmen, and Pullman employees. UP claims adjusters will ultimately pay out millions of dollars in damages. The Interstate Commerce Commission report on this wreck will take almost 3 months to complete. All surviving train crew members from both Train 104 and 102 will be interviewed. The Commission's findings will outline a grisly chain of events. Running through a heavy snowstorm, lead Train 104's engineer was unable to decipher several lighted signals as he approached them. In accordance with operating rules, Train 104's engineer stopped his train long enough to read the signals. Train 102, following close behind, was unaware of Train 104's difficulties. Inspections by UP's signal department just after the crash have found serious visibility problems due to frosted-over glass. No one has ever been able to determine what Train 102's engineer might have been thinking as he powered his train toward disaster at more than 70 miles per hour. The wreck at Jenkins Curve occurred on July 14, 1955. It involves the New Haven Railroad at Bridgeport, Connecticut at 3:42 a.m. The wreck is the result of a derailment and resulting collision. The train involved is 172, the Federal Express eastbound. The estimated speed is 75 miles per hour. Only 1 person is killed and 68 are injured. The wreck is the result of excessive speed on a curve. It sounded like a shriek in the darkness, a shriek that grew louder as she hit the curve. That's how witnesses described the early morning crash of New Haven's Train 172, the eastbound Federal Express at Bridgeport, Connecticut. Along with its locomotive, 15 of the Streamliner's 17 cars jumped the tracks at Jenkins Curve. Hurtling through the darkness, the train's equipment piled into a small yard switcher working an adjacent track below the main line. An appalling scene of wreckage greets the dawn as jumbled passenger cars sprawl on their sides across the New Haven right-of-way. Only 5 of the 15 derailed cars have managed to remain upright. Railroad workers and safety inspectors study the wreckage of New Haven's 363, an EP4 electric, as it lies on its side. Incredibly, the EP4's engineer will be the only fatality arising from this wreck. The fireman has escaped with moderate injuries. New Haven's engineer of track will examine the twisted rails at Jenkins Curve. His findings will constitute an integral part of the ICC's final report. Even as the track engineer prepares his report, maintenance of way personnel have begun to repair the ruined main line caused by Train 172's derailment. Twisted rails and shredded cross ties are pulled free to be replaced by fresh components which have been rushed to the scene. Elsewhere, wrecking crews stand by, waiting to re-rail damaged equipment. Emergency personnel have already evacuated the Federal Express's 68 injured passengers and railroad employees. Train 172 comprised a mixture of both modern streamlined equipment and older heavyweight equipment, along with a railway express reefer. As a heavy-duty steam crane stands ready, salvage personnel prepare to remove engine 364 from the scene for further study. This diesel switcher, 949, was struck by the electric engine as it came thundering down off the elevated main line. The wreckage almost claims yet another injury. Inspecting the damaged engine, an accident investigator misplaces his footing. A light, festive atmosphere seems to prevail among the midsummer spectators as they look on. Officers assigned to crowd control, however, find little to smile about. Damage to this engine is so extensive that it will have to be pulled away in pieces. Beyond police cordons, spectators and officers assigned to crowd control mingle in an uneasy alliance of anticipation. The body of Train 172's engineer has finally been cut free of the debris. Even as emergency workers load his body onto a stretcher, an enduring mystery begins to envelop the crash at Jenkins Curve. In its official report, ICC officials will place sole blame for the crash on this dead engineer, citing excessive speed on a curve. Yet, according to all records, this engineer was exceptionally conscientious. He was the type of man who, in the words of one New Haven employee, if he left 20 minutes late, he would arrive 20 minutes late. How did such an engineer suddenly become a speed demon, whisking his train through a 30-mile-per-hour speed restriction at over double the limit? The Interstate Commerce Commission will choose to ignore that question in its final report. It will focus almost exclusively on a report by the New Haven Railroad's engineer of track that the Federal Express hit Jenkins Curve at an estimated speed of 65 to 75 miles per hour. The question of why Train 172 was traveling at that speed will be largely ignored by the Commission, although sworn testimony raises this issue. Train 172's fireman testifies to the Commission that he noted nothing unusual in the train's speed until it entered the Jenkins Curve approach. At that point, he glanced over and saw the engineer leaning slightly forward in his seat. The fireman hesitated momentarily, not wanting to distract him. Seconds later, the train went lurching off the roadbed in a shower of sparks and crashing catenary poles. Was Train 172's engineer suddenly incapacitated just before the crash? Was he already dead when the wreck occurred? Is that why he was leaning forward in his seat instead of applying the train's brakes? Some will openly question the Commission's motives, believing it bent over backward to avoid embarrassing the financially strapped New Haven while the railroad attempted to reorganize itself. They will question whether New Haven management might not have contributed to the wreck by implementing several cost-cutting programs at the expense of employee safety. Several months before the wreck, for example, the full-time crew that had been permanently assigned to maintain the track at Jenkins Curve was abolished. Critics will ask what shape the track actually was in when the Federal Express plunged to its doom. Others will question whether the New Haven's motive power and passenger equipment has been adequately maintained since the railroad undertook its latest austerity programs. Was the ICC report on this crash a deliberate cover-up? Many believe so. Others remain unconvinced.